And welcome into another edition of the Hustle Show podcast here on Wager Talk TV for this Wednesday edition of the Hustle Short. I'm Mark Zinno, joined by Adam Trigger of Wager Talk. Adam, welcome in. Happy Wednesday to you. We got some college football. We got playoff baseball. So, plus we'll also do our NFL Survivor picks. A lot to get to here today on the Hustle Short. How are you?
I'm doing well, Mark. I got a comment on a comment someone made last week on this, and they're like, Trig looks so pale. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm just not as tan as Mark. I live in central New York. It's cold here. Like Mark lives in Atlanta. So of course I look pale next to him. He also goes outside. I just sit here and look at my computer screen all day. So you know what? Like, it is what it is.
I have been known to from time to time. Play with the kids, meet, greet the neighbors, get the mail, and any variety of getting outside of the house always helps me. But all right, let's start. Like college football slate tonight here on this Wednesday, so only two games. I know you got your eye on this Marshall game. How are you going at it?
Yeah, so this one's actually Thursday night, and I gotta say, Mark, sports betting has one of the few things where no matter how long you do it, it'll make you feel stupid at some point. Like to anyone, like you could be doing it 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and you'll never master it. That's the great thing about like sports betting, why we love it so much. I was on the college football show yesterday, as this game was sort of moving, and I like right before we went on air, I said, "Wow, like that the line moving up to 4, total head fake. Like, when is Marshall going to get slammed?" I talked about liking Marshall on the show, +4. Got off the show, went and did something, come back. Of course, it's 3.5, Mark, and I missed the move, and was forced to give out 3.5 when there was 4s and 4.5s there. So just humbled yet again by the odds makers and the betting market. But I still like Marshall a lot at +3.5 here. I did lock this in for clients. This is a 4% play for me. Hopefully you bet it when I was talking about it on the college football show yesterday and got yourself a 4, but I don't think it's going to matter. I do think it probably goes down to 3 when it's all said and done. Like I said, this one is a Thursday night game between James Madison and Marshall. And it really comes back to a couple things. So I talked about the market, and I'll acknowledge that again here. There's been respected money fading James Madison now for 4 weeks in a row, and they've missed all 4 weeks. You would have to go back to week 2 against Virginia to find a game where James Madison did not cover. They won that game 36-35. I believe they were a 6.5 point favorite there, but they've won all of their games this year, so they're 6-0. And now they have 4 straight win and covers, and where the number's been moving against them. So you go back to last week's Georgia Southern game, 2-point move. Go back to the Utah State game. I believe that line moved 2 points. Where if you were betting James Madison, you actually got yourself a bargain, and they won and covered pretty easily. And then the play that started that streak was Troy. That was the last time I bet against them, and of course they win that one as an outright dog. But I'm going to try to talk you into going against James Madison here, because I do think the streak ends in this spot. I think finally this is a really bad spot for James Madison. The Georgia Southern game was a very big game for them, and they win. And not only do they win, they blow them out. And now they've got to turn around and go on the road on a short week, and they run into a Marshall team that's got to be really motivated to make something good happen here. Of course, Marshall was a 4-0 team a couple weeks ago. They lose a hard-fought game to NC State. No one can fault them there. And I think they, to steal the saying from my good friend Kelly Stewart and Marco D'Angelo, who say it all the time, I think Marshall lost the NC State game twice. I really do, because they go out and they lose to Georgia State last week, and that's not a bad loss, Mark. Georgia State is 5-1, not a bad team by any means. Marshall averages 30.3 points per game, 420 yards of total offense per game. Cam Fancher's a capable quarterback, and this Marshall team can score. So for me here, it's going to be about Marshall being able to get a stop or two. But I think with Marshall at home, getting the 3.5, I really think this is a spot where they step up and just give you a great effort. And I think that great effort is good enough to cover. I actually like the Thundering Herd to win here. I think JMU finally takes their first loss of the season. But if they don't, Mark, I'm hoping that it's at least within that 3.5 point window so I can get the money here.
Yeah, going to be an interesting one tomorrow night, to say the least. So again, go to Adam Trigger's page here, wt.buzz/AT is where you go to get all of Trig's plays over at wagertalk.com. I want to take a quick look at the game 3 of the ALCS tonight here, Trig, between the Texas Rangers and the Houston Astros. I've kind of looked at this thing from a bunch of different ways here, and I think there's good arguments on both sides on why you would take one or the other, and you kind of hate those spots because you don't really want to play it. I had one look earlier today that I was focusing on and then got away from it. Christian Javier over 13 and a half outs, which basically means he needs to go 4 2/3 innings. So he has lasted at least 4 2/3 in 6 consecutive starts now. The last time he didn't was against the Padres back on September 9th. Prior to that, the last time he didn't get to 4 1/3 or 4 2/3 rather, was against the Texas Rangers right before the All-Star break, where he lasted 4 1/3, give up 9 runs and 8 hits. And so, my other look at this game here was to take the over in the first 5. I think you have a lot of things here at play. Again, Christian Javier, his numbers are not good. I know he's pitched well in his last 2 starts, and I know his postseason numbers have been pretty good over the last 2 years, but I just don't trust this guy this year. I think that in general, he's a guy, when you look at his numbers of having a 4.56 ERA and a whip near 1.3, it's not a guy I want to get behind for him to have a great start any given time out, because the numbers bear themselves out. Fortunately for him, he's also the recipient of the second best run support in baseball at 6.5 runs per game. So that tells me that for whatever reason, the Astros score when he's on the mound. On the flip side, Max Scherzer is going. It's going to be on a pitch count here, Trig. About 60, 65 pitches. How many innings is that? I have no clue. Could it be 3? Could it be 5? Who knows? But I would fade the idea that Max Scherzer is going to be dominant. He could be good, but I don't think he'll be dominant. I think there can be runs scored against him, and I think that there will be runs scored against Javier here. And I know it's a little juicy, but with the high total sitting at 9.5, we can get over 4.5 here at about minus 135. And it's probably the way I'll look to play tonight in the first 5, because my theory, if they ain't hitting early, probably ain't hitting late. So I don't think you'll get 2 runs scored in the first 2, and then all of a sudden an 8-run outburst in the last 3 innings, where all of a sudden they score. I know we saw a little bit of that last night with the Phillies, but completely different scenario. So I think they score early and often here. They go over 5 in the first 5 here, and we can look down that road, because I think both these teams and their bats are going to come out and show out tonight. Thoughts there, Trig?
Man, I can't disagree with your handicap there. As far as the game is concerned, Mark, I talked about this, on the baseball show on Monday. You're getting down to the end of the season here. Like, some of these games, we talked about this off air. As far as the side is concerned, I think you can make a pretty compelling case for both of these teams and why they should win this game. So I'm good with your handicap. I think that's a good way to attack some of these other markets, pitcher total outs, like team totals. I just think you're going to find a better bet there than trying to pick the winner in this one, which really does look like a game that could go either way, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. Again, make sure you guys check out the entire Hustle Show every Thursday night right here on Wager Talk TV at 7 o'clock, and it's full entirety. We get the whole band back together this week. You, CT Bets, Drew Martin Bets, and Kelly in Vegas all be on the Hustle Show tomorrow night, so make sure you guys check out that. All right, time for this week's weekly installment from Adam Trigger and I on NFL Survivor Picks. Last week, Trig, I gave out the Raiders, and lo and behold, the Raiders got home. So I was very happy with that. The other one that we talked about was the Rams. They also got home, so no sweat there. But this is a much tougher week from a Survivor standpoint. I mean, easy to look at and say, hey, Buffalo Bills had a close game last week. They should bounce back, even though they're on the road. They're playing a really bad team in New England. That's probably the biggest number out there. Seattle probably will get some consideration from a lot of people at home against Arizona. I don't know if I'd want to take the Niners, just simply because of the injury report to me. If there's no Christian McCaffrey and there's no Deebo Samuel, does it change things dramatically? It leaves open a whole different can of worms that I don't think I want to get involved in.
Yeah, so I talked about this with Brian Power yesterday, and I think I like that I'm on Tuesday and then I'm on again Wednesday, because I can kind of like revise the strategy as the week goes on. So I'm gonna continue to talk about Survivor in the context of the Circa Survivor contest, and I'll talk about my own experience. So I've currently have 5 entries left, and there are other people out there with multiple entries. So I think it's important to note, there's different strategies here. If you have 1 entry, as opposed to if you have multiple, right? Like you're going to have to look at it from a slightly different lens. So if you only have one entry left in Survivor, I mean, this week seems pretty straightforward. I really think that it's Seattle, and you just have to pray that this isn't the weekend that the pool gets cleaned out, right? Like this is a really good matchup for Seattle, in my opinion. They're coming back home. They need a win. It feels like a spot where they sort of get a win. Of course, last week, listen, I was on the Bengals on Sunday. Was one of my client plays, 4% play. I'll be the first one to admit that I was very fortunate to cash that ticket. Like Bengals -3 was a fortunate win for me. Now, the betting gods were sure to correct that for me later in the day. Of course, I was on the Patriots +3. They corrected it, right? Like gave me the safety there to give me a loss. But listen, the Seahawks very easily could have won last week. And so I think if they play a similar game or kind of continue to play their game, they get the win at home here over the Cardinals. The problem, and it's not really a problem, right? It's just you have to acknowledge that you're not going to be the only one that thinks that. Everyone is going to use the Seahawks this week, especially if you're in Circus Survivor, because for the most part, that's what people have left. The Bills, if you didn't use the Bills earlier this year against the Raiders, well, you probably used them last week if you still had them available against the Giants when they were a 15-point favorite and barely won, nearly should have lost on the last play of the game, maybe. So if chances are people don't have the Bills. Now, if you still have the Bills, I mean, you're going to get great pick equity there because not many people are going to have it. They are the biggest favorite on the board. But do you really want to, do you want to back the Bills in that division road game on the road, especially seeing the way they've played the last couple of weeks, specifically on Sunday Night Football against the Giants? So that's something you have to think about as well. If you have multiple entries, I would not use every single one on the Seahawks. I don't think it's that reliable of a spot. And, so in that case, Mark, I'd start to take your strategy from last week, try to pick off one of these short favorites. You talked about Raiders -3 last week. Saints, a small favorite on Thursday Night Football. Maybe you use the Saints and see if you hit one because you'll know the outcome of Thursday night before you have to lock in your weekend picks. But Mark, once you get past, there's not many short favorites I like this week. So I'll throw it back to you. Who's the short favorite that you really are trusting this week?
I will look at three of them in total. One, I'll look at the Rams. I don't think the Steelers are very good. I offensively, they're just going to struggle. I mean, it's going to be a slugfest between these two teams. And the only thing that you can hang your hat on, really, I mean, Pittsburgh gave up 30 to Houston, so they could easily give up 27 to the Rams. And I don't think that the Steelers offense can play catch up. But that's a game where you want the Rams out to like a 10-0 lead early and force Pittsburgh to play catch up the whole way. If for whatever reason the Steelers jump out to a lead, you're going to be biting what's left of your fingernails off. I will look at the Ravens at home because they're an exceptionally good home team. Lions on the road. We know Jared Goff's road splits is his second game in a row for the Lions on the road, right? And we know the trends, what happens in that second road game. Despite the fact that the Lions are an underdog, they only won 20-3 last week or 20-6 last week against Tampa Bay on the road. So I know Jared Goff played well, but the Ravens defense is much better than that of Tampa Bay. So I think that's a viable spot. And let me give you one more that's really going to make you crawl here, Trig. And there's two things to it. You ready? And I hope you are sitting down, so I want to ask you if you are. I know it's a team you don't necessarily want to use given the way the Circus Survivor contest goes and having to play certain teams. But the Eagles at home against the Miami Dolphins. I'll tell you right now, the Eagles will make my card on Sunday -2. I do not think they lose this game. I think them losing last week was the perfect refocus that they needed. And if you want one more feather in your cap, if you believe in this sort of thing, Tua Tagovailoa has never won a game that he started where the temperature was below 50 degrees. So he does not play well outdoors in cold weather. The Eagles coming off a loss, do not want to take two. Eagles are short favorite this week at home, Sunday Night Football. I don't think the Eagles will lose in this game.
Mark, I agree with you. I think Ravens and Eagles as short home favorites are really good options. Of course, if you are in the circuit contest, you have to make sure that's going to be the hang up on the Eagles for many people. The fact that, if you've burned the Chiefs and the 49ers so far, you can't really use the Eagles because of course you'd be leaving yourself with no one on Christmas, or not no one, but you'd have to take an underdog. But again, like I like just in a vacuum, like I like those pit, right? I think you're on the right side with the Eagles. I think you're on the right side with the Ravens. So yeah, I mean, again, you're talking about if this is the contrarian play to just going with the Seahawks, which everyone is going to do. And if you have multiple entries left, you have to do it. Like I know there's going to be people out there that put all their entries on the Seahawks this week because it's the only time you use the Seahawks. But guess what? It's still the NFL. We've seen the Cardinals win games already this year, or a game, and stay in other games. Like the Cardinals probably have another win in them at some point. And so if it does happen to be this week, you absolutely want to have at least another out there. But if you are stuck with one entry, I have to say like the Seahawks are the overwhelmingly best pick out there, and you just got to hope that this isn't the week that the pool gets cleaned out and you get through with the Seahawks and live to fight another day.
Yeah, again, it's very much a difficult spot at times, but I'll probably end up taking the Ravens and walking away. I think you do have to do some due diligence on who they play in the coming weeks and everything else, and and the other thing too about the Lions, they're also banged up. They have no David Montgomery
Yep.
out for several weeks, so the Ravens will probably make my card as well on Sunday. Of course, you can get all my picks at sm.buzz/mz. Use the code ZINO7. You'll get a 7-day pass for just $49 over there over at Sports Memo. And I know Wager Talk right now as well is offering a huge promotion all week long. Use 7-day pass for $69 over at Wager Talk. So that includes all of Adam's picks as well for his page over at Wager Talk. So final thoughts here, Trig, before we get out of here. We know where we're going for Survivor. We got Marshall. We got first 5 under in the ALCS game tonight. I'll tip it up to you for final thoughts here.
Yeah, join us tomorrow night, 7 p.m. for the full live show. Hustle. We'll continue the conversation. More picks right up until kickoff of Jag Saints. And take advantage of that 7-day coupon. I believe it works for pretty much any handicapper on the site. I don't think there's a limit to the number of people you can use it for. So take advantage of that. And head on over to Wager Talk and keep trying to cash tickets.
Follow me on Twitter at TopFlightSI. I'm at Mark Zino, MarkZino. Of course, subscribe to the Wager Talk YouTube channel. Hit that like button. Make sure you tell us why you love the content there. Jump in the comments and let us know your thoughts. For Adam Trigger, I'm Mark Zino. Go cash some tickets. Enjoy the games tonight, folks. We'll talk to you tomorrow.